Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know what you're saying. Where's the flashy open? You're looking at it. I'm Dan Haggerty. Hello. It's Monday. Thanks for being here. Lots of news, lots of stuff to talk about. We're excited to do so, and I'm glad to have you here with us. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. So reach out to us on email at thestory@kgw.com. Send me a tweet using that hashtag #HeyDan. Social media, if you got it, we're probably on it. Just look me up. Let's get to the big story. And tonight, we're talking about a big story that involves the vaccine floodgates beginning to open. A huge number of Oregonians became eligible for the vaccine today. So that includes frontline workers, their families, people with underlying health conditions. For many of you, this has been one of those days on your calendar that you've been staring at like a kid waiting for Christmas, a day that maybe you thought would never come, or one perhaps that's too good to be true. And for many others, it's a Monday. You see, there are many people who do not want this vaccine, people who do not plan to get this vaccine. It's something known as vaccine hesitancy because everything needs a name the media can overuse, and because it's a huge problem if we want COVID to be under control for real and for the long term. Here's Kristen Severance.
Convincing skeptics to get the vaccine is easier said than done.
As a doctor, I'm horrified. We know what works, we know what doesn't work.
Tonight, as the virus threatens to make another surge, vaccines
across the country, more people than ever before can get the COVID vaccine. The question is, do they want it?
I was very hesitant.
69-year-old Wayne Hudson was not planning on getting the COVID vaccine. He had a bad experience with the flu shot 40 years ago.
What was your biggest concern?
I was afraid that this would generate that same type of reaction. My windpipe had closed up to what the doctor said was half the size of my little finger.
Wow.
And it was a struggle to breathe. And because of that trauma, I've been very reluctant on any shots. I've not had a flu shot since.
Wayne is far from alone. Every day, the Delphi Group out of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh asks thousands of people on Facebook if they got the shot, plan to get it, or why they won't. It's the largest COVID-related survey of its kind. Alex Reinhardt is an associate professor at CMU.
So we've had over 2 million responses since January.
77% of people polled are either vaccinated or plan to be. 23% remain vaccine hesitant. Of those who are hesitant, the data shows 70% are most concerned with side effects.
Either side effects generally, or a smaller percentage of people are worried about things like they have allergies to vaccines or other bad reactions in the past, so they're concerned about getting vaccinated.
When it comes to race, the study highlights that more Black adults are willing to get the vaccine compared to a few months ago. In early January, 40% of Black adults were vaccine hesitant. Now, that number is 29%. But this group has the highest number of people concerned about side effects, 80%. Vaccine hesitancy is largest in young people. 31% of people 18 to 24 years old said they may not get the vaccine.
That was something that jumped out at us, the amount of young people who were hesitant. What reasons did they give for being unsure?
Yeah, we see the side effect concerns as one group, which I think, if you think about it, makes sense. Sort of, they have less to gain from the vaccine potentially if they're already young, don't have other conditions.
The fewer people to get the shot, the longer it takes to get herd immunity. Herd immunity is where a large part of the population is immune to a specific disease. If enough people are resistant to COVID, it has nowhere to go. So how does the U.S. overcome this hesitancy problem to get to herd immunity?
In broad terms, I think what's clear is that people need to know more about how the vaccine will affect them and what they can expect and how effective it is.
According to millions of responses, that information should come from healthcare workers. 16% of the vaccine-hesitant adults said they would be more likely to get the shot if the recommendation came from their own doctor. Dr. Cliff Coleman is an associate professor of family medicine at OHSU.
I think we haven't done the best job at starting these conversations in that same kind of way. Most of us, we were really trained to honor and respect patient autonomy.
And while he still honors that choice, Dr. Coleman has made a point to ask every patient about the COVID vaccine and if they have concerns. He'll also tell them about his own experience after getting the shot.
I felt tired after the first dose, and then after the second one, I developed a low-grade fever and felt tired and didn't have much energy for a day.
Dr. Coleman, is it true that when you experience symptoms, it's a good thing?
That's how I look at it. It's a sign that your natural immune system is responding in the way that it's supposed to.
After doctors, people said they'd be more likely to get the shot if recommended by a family member or friend.
Did you get it?
Yes, I did.
While talking to his doctors played a role in Wayne's decision to get the vaccine, it was someone else who convinced him to go for it.
The real key thing that told me to get it was I talked to my priest. And my priest said that it is my responsibility to my fellow Oregonians to get the shot.
So he did, and he was just fine. He hopes other hesitant people talk to their doctor, friends, or see this story and do the same.
So, Kristen joining us now, a pretty simple lesson. Talk to your doctor, talk to friends or family.
Exactly. I think we all need to really do a better job about, talking about the experience after we get the shot, whether that's talking with your doctor or asking your family or friends. One thing the report did not get into, misinformation and the role that plays in vaccine hesitancy. Dr. Coleman told me almost all of the patients who say they don't want to get the vaccine, they really cite these fake stories or these things that we've already debunked. So I know that's something that we're going to continue to cover as we do more and more stories on this such important topic of vaccine hesitancy.
All right, Kristen, thank you.
You're welcome.
Why don't we count the number of people who have gotten the vaccine? Because it is pretty big. As of this afternoon, more than 1.26 million Oregonians have gotten at least the first dose. A majority of these people have gotten their second dose as well. But this puts us nearly at 30% of the state's population with at least one shot. Washington, they're doing pretty well, too. They have more than 2.32 million people have gotten the first dose of this COVID vaccine. That works out to be a little more than 30% of the state's population. Now, something tells me you remember this video. How could you not? All right, this was kind of a defining moment for the unrest in Portland. Social media helped this video spread all over the world last September of someone throwing a Molotov cocktail into a crowd of people and almost hitting police officers. Now, that was 6 months ago. And police, they say they finally think they may know who threw it. An investigative reporter, Kyla Boshi, found out their suspect has quite a backstory.
An Indiana man is facing the most serious charges yet related to last summer's violent protests in Portland. Prosecutors charged Malik Muhammad with 26 felony counts, including attempted aggravated murder for allegedly throwing Molotov cocktails at police. In one case, court records suggest investigators link Muhammad to this Molotov cocktail thrown toward a police vehicle during a September 21st protest at the old Southeast Precinct. A nearly identical Molotov cocktail was used just 2 days later, say prosecutors, during a demonstration near the Justice Center in downtown Portland. Prosecutors believe Muhammad threw the burning bottle, which exploded into a fireball, scorching one officer's uniform. Additionally, police believe Muhammad used a metal baton to smash out windows at the Oregon Historical Society, Portland State, and other businesses during a riot on October 11th. Muhammad was arrested on several gun charges, but that case was dismissed. The charges have now been reinstated along with new, more serious counts, and on Monday, Muhammad appeared in an Indianapolis courtroom after his arrest. Muhammad told the judge, "These charges are completely brand new to me. They had a slew of other trumped-up charges that they just recently dropped, and then all of this happened." Muhammad's mother told KGW her son traveled to Portland to participate in protests after having led various rallies in Indiana last summer. Muhammad made headlines after helping to defuse a tense standoff between police and demonstrators in Indianapolis by hugging a police lieutenant, then walking arm in arm.
I never in a million years thought I would embrace a cop like that.
And days after that exchange, Muhammad had a private meeting with Indiana's governor, according to an Indianapolis TV station.
Here he was speaking with Wish TV outside the gate after a long discussion with Governor Eric Holcomb about a legislative agenda and other priorities.
Portland police worked with various agencies, including the FBI, on this months-long investigation to try and track down a man investigators say is responsible for some of the most significant incidents of violence and destruction during last summer's protests.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining us now. Kyle, first, I kind of want to give people an idea of what it's like to do your job. I think they often think that these stories just get handed to us and somebody says, cover this. But this was a process kind of following up on this specific case.
Yeah, and it does involve a lot of digging. It originally came from one of our savvy producers who said, I wonder whatever happened to one of these cases, particularly the vandalism at the Oregon Historical Society. So she reached out, made some phone calls, and ultimately a source told us this is a very active investigation. In fact, we anticipate an arrest in the next few days. I started working it, found out that it actually focused on a suspect back in Indiana who had a really interesting backstory, continued to make calls and follow up, and then ultimately leading to his arrest. And he was in court today, and now you see the story.
I think one thing people will find really interesting is the FBI's involvement in this case. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there were a lot of agencies involved in this months-long investigation. But to your point, I was really fascinated to learn about the role the FBI played. In the court documents, it talked in several instances how plainclothes FBI agents were in that crowd of demonstrators, and helped to identify and also lead to the arrest, at least in this case, of Mr. Muhammad. So clearly, not only is it local police that are involved, but the feds have a heavy presence as well.
Got it. Kyle Aboshi, as always, thank you. Now, you remember that proposal to increase the beer tax in Oregon by like 3,000%? Well, it didn't go over so well. So addiction recovery groups have a new plan. We'll tell you about it. And I know most of you don't even want to come close to thinking about fire season right now after the last year that we had, but one of our viewers thought we should look back at the massive Tillamook burn in the KGW vault. We'll do that too when the story continues. Welcome back. I'm always going through your emails and Facebook comments. I kind of earmark a couple to read at the end of the show. I'll do that tonight. We also want to know from you what you would like to see us cover. So send us an email to the story at kgw.com or use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Now, Oregon loves its beer and wine. I mean, we celebrate that, don't we? If you look at those lists, you Google like best beer cities in America, you look those lists up. We're typically one of the only states that's on there twice because we have Portland and Bend. As far as our wine is considered, ooh la la, some of our grapes rival France. I know we are proud of this. We brag about it, which is like one of my favorite types of brags. It reminds me of the guy who uses the word we when talking about his favorite sports team. Like, I think we have a pretty good shot this year. You don't play for the team. But I'm curious, how often does that pride for our beer and wine scene consider the whole equation? Like the fact that Oregon also ranks near the bottom of the list for substance abuse and resources to treat alcoholism. It's a strange fact when you look at them side by side. We love our alcohol, but not our alcoholics. And it brings us to another edition of Vice News. Where to start? Where to start on this? First, let's look at the numbers. All right, Eco Northwest analyzed the year of 2019 and presented this report in January of this year. They think that the total cost of excessive drinking cost Oregonians $4.8 billion in 2018. $2 billion in lost earning for businesses, $1 billion for things like car crashes and court cases and stuff like that, $700 million for health care, and $600 million for treatment and social work. Now, data is interesting. And data like that can be a little bit confusing to hear because it's not like the state would be $5 billion richer if alcohol vanished tonight. But and I'm not downplaying the suffering caused by excessive drinking, but with dollars and cents, if you just want to look at the numbers, businesses do find ways to make up costs. Doctors and lawyers get paid for saving a life or getting justice for a victim of a DUI crash. And social work is an admirable profession, and people pay their bills with the money they make, helping someone get their life back together. But alcohol, of course, can create massive amounts of suffering, and that $4.8 billion is an attempt to quantify it. I look for some data on the amount of money the beer and wine industry generates in the state. I found this report from the Oregon Wine Board. It's from 2013, so nearly 10 years ago. And they estimated at the time that the wine industry alone contributed $3.3 billion in economic activity to the state. Again, these numbers have a lot of moving parts, and that means they can be manipulated, which is exactly how I kind of feel trying to learn anything from the two sides fighting over this bill, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But first, let's talk about the bill. It started as a massive tax increase since Oregon has really low taxes for beer, cider, and wine. And when I say massive, I mean massive, nearly 3,000%. The tax on a barrel of beer would have gone from $2.60 to $72.60. The tax on a barrel of wine would have gone from 65 cents to $10.65. Beer and wine sellers would have gone from some of the lowest taxes in the country to some of the highest overnight. And people freaked out. They threw a fit about this, and the bill fell apart because of that. But it didn't go away completely. Instead, lawmakers came up with a new bill that would fund a task force to reduce alcohol consumption by 15%, which will almost certainly swing the conversation back to higher taxes. Here's how one of the lead proponents of the bill explained it to us.
Honestly, we don't even want the alcohol industry to pay it. We want them to pass it on to the consumer, because we want the consumer to begin to reduce the level of beer that they're consuming, the wine or alcohol, but namely in key categories of underage drinkers and binge drinkers. The craft industry, if you Google pricing craft beer, what you'll find from their own industry is that most people that buy craft beer don't care about the price. And the original legislation we had would have only raised the price of a bottle of beer by 21 cents. Now, they told you that it's a 2,800% increase. They're trying to tax us out of business. Well, 2,800% of virtually nothing is virtually nothing.
Remember how I said I felt just a smidge manipulated? Here's why. So the way he explained that it would only be a 21-cent increase on a bottle of beer. What's the big deal? Except that's how a sales tax works. A sales tax gets tacked on at the end, and you, the consumer, the person buying the thing, pays all of it. This tax is not a sales tax. It would start at the top of the food chain. So the idea that the alcohol industry wouldn't pay for it as the costs there kind of trickle down, it's a strange argument. Also, the statement that craft beer drinkers don't care about how much their beer costs, I don't know who they're interviewing. I know some craft beer drinkers, and they do care. Lastly, to call a tax hike that would amount to one of the highest in the country as virtually nothing seems a little disingenuous. But that's politics, I guess. And I got a heavy spoonful of it from the other side, too.
So statistics can be tricky when a lot of different statistics are being thrown around. But if you look at some of them in terms of alcohol addiction and where Oregon sits nationally as one of the worst states, and then treatment options, where Oregon sits with one of the states with the fewest options, and then you consider that the people who pay taxes to beer and wine in this state pay some of the lowest in the nation. Do you think it's reasonable that beer and wine should be taxed at a higher rate than it is right now in order to help balance out those other two factors?
For now and for the foreseeable future, we are at a hard no on tax increases for the reasons that I stated. These are local small business owners. There are other avenues to bring funding into the state. We have not been brought to the table. No one from the alcohol industry has been invited to this conversation to figure out opportunities for finding the funds. Instead of villainizing our industry, which creates jobs, which helps support families that own these businesses.
Sure. But you say, let's come to the table. And I said, well, should there be any increase in tax? And you're like, that's a hard no. That seems like a tough position to start a conversation around a table with a hard no.
Well, if we'd been brought to the table originally, perhaps it wouldn't be a hard no. But as on tax increase, it is absolutely a hard no, at least right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
So right now, this bill is in the House Behavioral Health Committee. There's a work session scheduled for Wednesday where lawmakers could vote to send it to the Senate. We're going to keep you posted on what happens. All right, I got this comment here from Tom. With fire season around the corner, go into the vault for footage of the Tillamook burn. Maybe compare the acreage to the fires we were seeing today. Well, hopefully fire season isn't right around the corner, first of all. All right, especially since a lot of areas are still recovering from those historic fires in September. Last year, fire season officially started in Oregon in July, so we still got some time. Anyway, the rest of your comment there, the Tillamook burn, it was massive. It was actually a bunch of different fires in the same area over almost 2 decades that burned a total of 350,000 acres. But last year, we had a bunch of huge fires that all exploded during that Labor Day windstorm. The two biggest, the Beachy Creek and Lion's Head fire, they emerged into the area that was larger than the Tillamook burn. More than 1 million acres burned across the state just in 2020. Now, we checked the KGW vault, and we do have some great old footage of the Tillamook burn from way back in the day. And we want to give you a look at what we found right now.
We usually think of fires as a one-off thing that might happen once a year. But after the Tillamook burn broke out 87 years ago, on August 14, 1933, it kept reigniting in the northern Coast Range every year until 1951. It was actually a series of fires. The worst one broke out near Gales Creek, west of Forest Grove, during a logging operation. In 10 days, it burned more than 40,000 acres. That's about the size of the 2017 Eagle Creek fire. But then it exploded. Within a day, it spread to 240,000 acres and created a firestorm. It didn't stop burning until the fall, when it finally started to rain. But it had burned so much land, all those dead and dried out trees became a powder keg, and that's what kept reigniting year after year. In 1951, when the fires finally stopped, the state began a huge restoration project. People planted more than 72 million seedlings over the next 20 years, and in 1973, Governor Tom McCall designated the former burn area as the Tillamook State Forest.
All right, hey, if you got suggestions for the vault, let us know. Use that hashtag HeyDan. Got my phone in my hand right now. I'm going to be looking for some comments to comment on when we finish the story next. All right, hey, let's get to some comments here. What am I doing with this phone? It never wants to react the right way. So, Jack LaFond wrote in and said, so, if you don't feel bad at all after your second COVID-19 vaccine, is that bad? Because when Kristen was doing her interview off the top of the show talking about vaccine hesitancy, she mentioned that it's a good thing if you feel those symptoms, if you don't feel well after you get the shot. And it's a little confusing when it's stated that way, because yes, it is a good thing, because what it does is it gives you kind of a tangible example of the fact that the vaccine is working. But if you don't get those symptoms, it doesn't mean that it isn't working. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like it tells you if your body is reacting to that. It tells you, like, look, my body is reacting to this, and it's doing so in a way that it's supposed to. It's supposed to kind of fight it, right? Even though it's not the virus, it's just the antibodies. But you get my point. So no, if you get the second shot and you don't feel any symptoms, you don't feel sick, it's not a negative thing. So this one from David. I watched the story on vaccine hesitancy. It almost sounds like people who do not want the vaccine are going to be pressured to get it in order to achieve herd immunity. Well, I don't think that the government's going to storm in and start putting needles in people's arms. But yeah, I think there are ways, especially if it reaches a certain status and gets approved federally. Right now it's in an emergency status, these vaccines. If it gets approved federally, then your employer can force you to get it or not work there anymore. I mean, in a couple of years, this is just a theory, but good luck getting the insurance companies to pay for COVID symptoms in the hospital if you have turned down a vaccine or never were vaccinated. So it's going to be those types of pressures that certainly will start to show up in society. I don't think that there's any way around them. So you might have heard that we launched the Story newsletter. That's why this whole QR codes in the background behind me right now. So if you kind of want to get caught up on what we do every week, if you can't watch every night, it's a real easy thing to subscribe. Open the camera on your phone, aim it at that QR code while I ramble on and on. I'll step out of the way. It'll take you to a link where you can sign up for the newsletter. Has all kind of stuff that we do during the week and some stuff that doesn't quite make it into the show. So I know people have been giving us some great reviews on it so far. If there's anything you'd like to see us do differently, you know how to get a hold of me. Use that hashtag HeyDan. It's Monday. Man, we got a lot in today. See you tomorrow.